Good. And I'm just going to turn off the microphones of everybody else so we don't have any distracting noise. So let me begin again by welcoming everyone to the course. I am Manjo Oyson, your lecturer and course coordinator. Where did that come from? I thought I had muted everyone. Hold on. Okay, there we go. So I'm the course coordinator for Administrative Law. And what I was hoping to do tonight was actually just to flag your attention to the danger of being part of an online course. I say this because there is an advantage, obviously, in being part of an online course and being a distance student. And that's mainly because such courses provide you a lot of flexibility in terms of when you want to study. And it obviously allows you freedom to just go on doing your jobs and deal with all sorts of family commitments. So that's the beauty of being part of an online program. Plus, you could obviously just go through the learning content at a certain pace according to whatever is convenient and comfortable for you. So it has its advantages, but I need to bring to your attention the fact that the attrition rate of online courses is actually disproportionately higher than those in traditional classroom settings. So the attrition rate, in other words, the number of students who fail to complete a course, is actually higher if they are part of an online program. And the reason for this seems to be that because, on the one hand, although flexibility is a huge advantage, it can also be a death trap in a sense. It can be a source of problems later on. Because if you don't set routines, if you don't create a plan, there's a very good chance and possibility that you will then forget to actually devote sufficient time and attention to your studies. And before you know it, there are assessments that are due. And then you feel like you're overwhelmed by all the readings that need to be done. And therefore you feel less confident about passing certain assessments. So I think I just need to emphasize really the importance of creating a structure and regimen on your part. Most of you, I assume, are actually in your year 2. So you've been exposed to a huge extent to the intricacies and the complexity and the challenges in being a distance student. However, I guess it's worth emphasizing and just repeating the importance of really putting in the needed attention to do well in the course. I say that because when I was teaching this course, Administrative Law in Term 2, I was very disappointed with the results. Okay, very disappointed because the one thing you need to realize is that unlike other courses, whether it's contracts or constitutional law, where the concepts are actually quite complex and quite difficult to understand and master, actually, the nice thing about administrative law is that the concepts in this course are actually quite easy to understand. And there are just very few principles that you really need to grapple with. And once you've grappled them, the succeeding weeks are actually just kind of a repetition or an attempt to dig deeper into the legal principles. So there are just recurring themes in administrative law, and they're really quite easy to master and understand. Okay, so that's the good thing. However, I think the problem that I've noticed in Term 2, for example, was that because administrative law appears to be easier compared to the other courses, there was a tendency on the part of some of the students not to put in the needed time and effort into the course. And as a result, I think the attrition rate was about 25%, which was really disappointing. And I felt like, I did not do well as a teacher. There were just so many who failed to complete the course. So when I say they failed to complete the course, it means that there were at least about 20% of the students who had absent fails, meaning they failed to do most of the assessments. And there were probably one or two who were unable to sit in the final written assessment, and that was quite disappointing. I got the sense when I was doing the weekly tutorials that a lot of the students. Oh yeah, but that's the other thing, because I think Brad was saying earlier that the reason why there seemed to be a number of students who've joined tonight's tutorial, because we've got 43 students here, and that's really good. The reason why there seemed to be a number of students joining tonight's session was because there is a 10% online participation that is allocated for turning up and engaging in our tutorial sessions, and that's true. But actually, that was also true for term 2. So the kind of assessment items we had for this term were also present in term 2, and yet, out of the about 44 students that I had, there would usually be only about 5 students who would turn up at the tutorials. And so when I was asking the students who would be regular participants in the tutorial sessions, what could have been the reasons why many of their peers were not attending the online tutorial, they were saying that they were spending more of their time in some of the more difficult subjects, such as property law, and they really needed to be there. But it was really disappointing, because in the first place, students like in administrative law, you have an opportunity actually to come up with more marks by answering the discussion questions or by engaging during the online tutorials. But many of the students in term 2, unfortunately, did not even bother turning up for the online tutorials, and neither did they bother answering many of the discussion questions. I just didn't get it, despite repeated reminders that the answers to the discussion questions comprised 10% of their final grades. Many of them did not even bother submitting any answers to the discussion questions, so they just wasted opportunities to increase their grades, their final grades. And that's quite disappointing. I think there must have been about 25% of the students who did not put in the effort towards answering any of the discussion questions. So that was sad. And I am just hoping that you do not become complacent about the fact that administrative law is simpler to learn. And therefore, because it seems to be simpler to learn, then you'd rather devote most of your time to the more difficult subjects. If you become strategic about the whole thing, you need to realize that whether or not you're taking up administrative law or a more complex subject, such as perhaps property law, in terms of the weight, they're going to be the same. So to a great extent, it makes no sense why you would devote 20 hours to a specific subject and then only devote 2 hours in administrative law if, at the end of the day, the grades that are given are going to be of equal weight. So you need to, therefore, just as a reminder, you need to really, therefore, put in sufficient effort in preparing for administrative law. And I realized that it was quite clear that a lot of the students did not put in sufficient effort in trying to study for administrative law, because the quality of the final written assessment was really very, very poor. Let me repeat that. It was so unfortunate that when I was marking the final written take-home paper, the quality of the papers was really very, very poor. And I just felt bad in a sense, because I was thinking, we're going to have at some point, a cohort of students who are going to join the ranks of the legal profession. And if this is going to be the quality of their papers, I mean, what kind of lawyers are we bringing into the profession? So when I say that the quality of their answers was poor, I'm referring both in terms of the substantive aspect, meaning I felt that they were not able to master the contents enough. And the other aspect was in terms of their communication skills. Which one was that? Amelia Bond. That might not be a bad thing being asked. Which one, Amelia, was going to be a bad thing? Which one? Just to clarify. Oh, getting low results in the final exam. Okay. But I just felt that it is so easy to actually come up with good grades in administrative law, mainly because the concepts are easy. This is a very easy subject. When you compare it to others, like constitutional law is really more complex, and we happen to be teaching constitutional law now to first-year students. Administrative law is actually much simpler. However, if you want to be able to master it, you just have to put in the time and the effort to understanding it. Now, you know, it's helpful for you to go through the lecture notes. It's also helpful to be joining the online tutorials where we dig deep into certain problem questions, but there is no way towards replacing the need to really read the textbook. So I'm really hoping, and oh, for Amelia, is that your last semester? Oh, for last semester, I mean for the last semester. Okay. Yeah, so I'm really hoping that this will be a good reminder, an opportunity for me to remind you to really put in the needed time to preparing for administrative law. And the other thing was that I think there must have been about 4 students who had to fail the course. So there were 44 who were enrolled, actually 50, more than 50 were enrolled, and about 10 of them ended up becoming absent fails. And there were 4 students who received failing marks, which was unfortunate. There was simply no reason why anyone should have had to fail administrative law, because as I said, it's a subject that is actually quite easy to understand and easy to master. And yeah, it just might have been that some students may have taken the course for granted, and I'm hoping that will not have to happen. In fact, I am quite thankful about the fact that, you know, we have so many students joining tonight's session, and that's really gratifying for a lecture to have so many students attending. Yeah, and as Helen said, really the cases would be beneficial. Wait, which one's the 4th edition? Is that the older one? The 4th edition, I think, is the one for 2012, because there is a new edition. I haven't really had the chance to go through the new edition, mainly because I only received a copy of the new textbook about 2 weeks ago. But I would imagine that there hasn't really been much change in many of the court cases on administrative law. I know this because I keep abreast of what's going on through the LexisNexis cases. So, yes, what was that?
It's Molly. I just wanted to let you know that the textbook hasn't been sent to Bundaberg campus yet, so I haven't got a copy, and they're still waiting at Rockhampton for a copy from the publisher, so I'm not going to have the textbook for a little while.
Okay.
So I was just wondering if you could maybe put something up on Moodle to help until I get the textbook, and anybody else who's in the same boat. Yeah.
That's right. Well, the problem is that we can't really copy these pages, or we probably could, maybe just one chapter, because there are issues about copyright. So it's probably permissible to copy one chapter. I'll have to ask the university library if they would permit that. But otherwise, if, oh, there's a back order. But otherwise, I will be able to tell you that you will not be at a disadvantage if you have the older edition. Now, if there will be a major departure in terms of the key principles, then I will tell you about those key changes. But otherwise, if you happen to have the old edition, that should be fine. And, you know, if it will take a while for the old copies, no, I don't really think that there are any old copies of the text, because when I went to the Brisbane Library about a week ago to just look for some of their books, I couldn't, at least in the Brisbane campus, I couldn't find I couldn't find any textbook by Craik and Macmillan. We may have copies in the Rockhampton Library. I don't really know. You're gonna have to check that. Yeah. Okay. Now, so in terms of the textbook, I will see if I could get some chapters to be copied through the library, if that were possible. But otherwise, just go through the lecture notes and the lecture videos, because they would be helpful. And, you know, it's still just the first week topic that we're covering when we meet again next week. so it shouldn't be much of a problem. Yeah. So what else? Right. Yeah. I'm just really hoping that, you know, this will be a cohort that will end up with better grades, because I do recognize some names here who are quite competitive in terms of aiming for good grades. So I recognize some names because they were my students in constitutional law, and that's good news to me, which means that, you know, they're going to be pushing themselves. Oh, that's Brad, and, you know, so many of you there. Vivian, and then there's Audrey, among others. I think there's Melissa as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to identify all of those who I know are HD students, but it's always a good thing that they're there. It means, you know, this group of students are likely going to be pushing the others to do even better. And if I might just state to you what I do know, there are some students there who are quite willing to help. I mean, I know of Brad, who I know is one of the student mentors. He would be more than willing, including, I suppose, Melissa Elwood and Audrey Gunn, more than willing to help other students. So it's important because, as I said, you are in an online learning environment, and so you have the advantage of flexibility, but there's the problem with the structure and the lack of regimen. But more than that, the learning in an online environment can actually be socially isolating. You're actually on your own. It's different when you go to a physical classroom where you meet your peers and you meet your classmates, because then you can actually physically engage with them. And that's quite helpful because you end up motivating each other, find out, you know, how they're doing in terms of their studies. But when you're doing it online, especially in a, you know, distance education setting, there's a very good chance that some of you will end up studying solely by yourselves. And it's crucial that you try to touch base with other students, because a lot of these students, many students I'm sure in our course, will be more than willing to help others. And I am volunteering the name of Brad Marler, for example. I think Brad is more than willing to help others. Yeah.
Anything for a fee, Manjo.
Yeah, a cup of coffee. A cup of coffee will do. Yeah.
You're selling me that too cheap. Not just any coffee.
I was going to say, Brad sounds like a lawyer already.
Yeah, we should congratulate Brad because he was recognized by the University Vice Chancellor just last week for being one of the, you know, brilliant student mentors. Well done, Brad. Yeah, so Mentor of the Year, absolutely. Well done, well done. Yeah. So I would encourage you to touch base with your fellow students, because what you need to remember is that doing an LLB, for example, well done, Brad. So you're getting all of those, you know, those compliments from everybody else. Well done, really. The one thing, yeah, the one thing you need to remember is that when you're doing a course such as LLB, it's not just all about trying to learn the law. It's really building the network. This is your opportunity to actually build links with your, you know, co-lawyers of the future. For example, I do know of a story whereby the former President George W. Bush, the president who already had 2 terms of office in the United States prior to President Barack Obama becoming the American president, I do know that he, in fact, appointed a lot of his classmates to cabinet positions. So use this occasion when you do the LLB to get to know others, because having a network always helps. Knowing people always helps. Not only in the future, but even now, because you can always then access, you know, the support that others are able to provide. So I would strongly encourage that as well. Now, so I've said something about the challenges of being part of an online distance education system. What I'd like to do now is to just go through some of the assessment tasks and to clarify some of the expectations there. So let me begin by talking about the online group participation, which comprises 10% of the final grade. So there are 2 ways at least of getting marks for the online group participation. Now remember, 10% may not seem to be much, okay? But when you think about it, that 10% can make a difference between getting a high distinction and a distinction. It can make a whole difference between getting a fail or a pass, or between a pass and a credit. So do not underestimate the value of 10% of a final grade. It can make a huge difference. Even a single mark can make a huge difference. Because remember, the difference between an HD and a D, I think is only, well, it's just 0.01. So I think it's about, what is it? It's about 84 point something, 0.5 or something. So, you know, one single mark can make a huge difference in terms of the final grade. So, okay, thank you, Brad, about the networking. Okay, so in relation, therefore, to the 10% for the online group participation, do not underestimate the value of such an assessment, because 10% is 10%. It can really make a huge difference. Now, how do you get 10%? Actually, it's so easy to get 10% for online group participation, because one, if you join the online tutorial each week and engage, and if you join the online tutorial, you're most likely going to be engaging, because I will force you to engage. In other words, when you come up, for example, with a tutorial problem, I'll be requiring you to post your answers in the chat box. So therefore, that's your engagement. So you will end up, you know, getting 1% of your final grade each time you join a tutorial session. But for those of you who will then be watching this recording, hold on, am I recording this? Okay, good. So I'm recording. So now for those of you who will be watching this recording, yeah, and because you're unable to join a tutorial session for whatever reason, you do have an opportunity to get marks by coming up with an answer to the discussion, to one of the discussion questions. So even though there might be 4 or 5 discussion questions that are posted for each weekly topic, you actually only need to answer 1 discussion question each week. So let me repeat that. Even if there are 4 or 5 questions that have been posted in relation to a specific weekly topic, you only need to answer 1 of those discussion questions, and that will be enough for you to get 1% of the final grade. So if you do this consistently each week across the term, then you get 10% of your final grade. So it's something that's easy to do. But as I said earlier, it is regrettable that a lot of students, for example, in term 2, did not take advantage of this one. Now, it is not a way of just giving away grades. We're not just giving away grades for online participation, because it is crucial that whatever you post as an answer to the discussion questions should be a legitimate attempt to answer the question. And obviously, it can be quite embarrassing if you just put nonsense as part of your answer, because your answers are visible to everybody else. Now, in addition, I will do my best to actually, well, I will actually definitely be going through each of the answers that you post in the discussion question forum, but I will not be able to provide individual feedback. I will be able to provide some global feedback at the end of the week, for example, but I cannot provide individual feedback. You do have an opportunity to benchmark your answer to what is a suggested answer, because 2 weeks after we have discussed a specific topic, I would then post the suggested answers in Moodle. So then you can compare your answer to mine. Now, one thing I need to flag and call your attention to when you go through the suggested answers is that there are always 2 components to answers. One is the substantive aspect, in the sense that you got the answer correctly. In other words, you do know the law, and you have properly stated what the law is and how that law applies to whatever the legal problem might be. So, but that's one part. The other part is really how you answer, come up with the answer. The formal part, the communication style, the way you argue your point, whether or not your grammar is good, whether or not you're making a convincing or persuasive argument. That's the other aspect of coming up with good marks. In the same manner that when you come up with a legal memorandum or you try to answer the final written assessment, it is insufficient if all you do would be to try to restate the law. So the ability, therefore, to come up with persuasive answers is crucial, because at the end of the day, what lawyers do is to argue that their point or their legal position is better and more valid than that of the opposing side. So being a lawyer is often all about trying to come up with good legal arguments. And so therefore the ability to articulate, the ability to state what the legal principle is and tie it to the facts is all part of the way we assess answers. Would references be needed? In the discussion, in the answers to the discussion questions, it will be better if you provide references, because the problem really is that whether it's a final written assessment or a legal memorandum, for example, if you do not cite references, meaning you don't cite cases, for example, or you don't cite specific provisions of statutes, then we begin to wonder, what's your basis for saying this? I mean, I know what the law is because I've studied that, but how do I know that what you're saying is actually based on the law, or are you just kind of, guessing? Now, the law is all about referencing all the time. So when you make an argument before the judge, you can't just make an ex cathedra statement without citing what the case law is or what the statute is. So referencing is crucial. Okay, so in other words, there are two problems actually if you don't reference. There are two problems. One, if you don't reference, it weakens your argument straight away, because it tells me if you're not referencing, then you're saying this is your idea. But the point is, why would I even bother about what your idea is? I'm more interested on whether or not you know what the case law is, or I'm more interested in knowing whether or not you know what the statute is. So if you tell me, if you're just expressing your own idea, then it's really of little value. Your idea comes out in the way that you synthesize and present your arguments. That's where your idea comes in. But your idea shouldn't, whatever appears in your answers should not have to be original, because that's what the law is all about. The only ones who can be original would actually be the judges. But for us, we need to cite case law. So every time you come up with a statement, that's right. Yeah, no one listens to us. So, which also means that do not cite my lecture notes, because my lecture notes are not a source of law. You should be citing case law. Okay, now, so that's one part. If you fail to cite the appropriate references or sources, you weaken your argument, because there's the question of the credibility of the source. And secondly, the problem is, if in fact your statement is a good summation of what case law is all about, in other words, you've actually restated the case law or a legal principle correctly, then you have a problem with plagiarism, because you're copying somebody else's idea without acknowledging the source of that idea. You are plagiarizing the idea. So if the idea belongs to somebody else, you need to be able to cite it. Yep, that's right. So you cannot cite the lecture notes as a source, as a reference. The lecture notes are there to assist you to supplement your learning, but they cannot be a source in any of the assessments. Now, so as I said, the danger with failing to properly reference is that you are committing plagiarism. You are likely to be committing plagiarism because you are, restating the idea or opinion of somebody else without attributing the source of that idea to the original thinker. And in an academic setting, that is a serious concern. And I'm hoping that will not have to happen. So referencing is crucial. Don't cite Google. You don't cite Wikipedia, but just to clarify, if you use Google, actually, there are a lot of materials in Google which you can access. So in other words, Google can be a treasure trove of journal articles and even cases, because when you look for a case, for example, by typing it in the Google search box, some of the cases might be used. In other words, if you use Google as a search engine, that is fine. But if you use Google itself as the authority, then that won't be fine. Okay, but if you use Google as a search engine to then uncover some key sources of law, that's good. But you cannot cite a website in Google as a source of law or as a reference. Okay, so that's clear. So let me repeat. As far as the online group participation is concerned, if you prefer to come up with marks for the online group participation by just coming up with answers in the discussion questions. All you need to do is to just answer one question each week. And I think I've already indicated in the course profile that we do have 2 cutoff dates. So I think for weeks 1 to 5, the cutoff date is sometime in week 6, which means that if you fail to have given your answers prior to the cutoff date, then you lose the opportunity to get marks for the first half of the term. So it could be about Christmas Day, as Letitia would indicate here. And then we have that next set of discussion questions, which correspond to the second half of the term. And that will again comprise 5% of the final grade. So we have 2 cutoff points. So be aware of that, because if you miss the first cutoff point, then you cannot backtrack and try to come up with the answers. It would have been too late. And it'll be difficult for you to make an argument that you'd like to ask for an extension, because there's more than enough time for you to actually start answering those discussion questions as early as today. So I would suggest that as you start going through your textbook and becoming more familiar about administrative law, try to slowly answer the discussion questions, because the discussion questions actually force you to think about the legal principles in relation to specific facts. So in other words, we then begin to apply what we have read to problem scenarios that are posted in the discussion questions. So that's one. The second aspect, as I said, whereby you can get marks for the online group participation will be by engaging in the online tutorials. And it will be something that would be very welcome to me if most of you continue to join the tutorial sessions, because it's more fun when there are students around instead of just dealing with 2 or 3 or 4 students. So tonight's attendance is something I'm hoping that can be replicated in the future. So that's really good. Now, there are 2 other assessment pieces involved. The other one will be a legal memorandum. I can't remember what the deadline is, but as far as the legal memorandum is concerned, it will involve providing legal advice to a fictitious client. Oh, that's the 21st of December. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Melissa. Week 6, okay. So thank you for that. And it is based on a common set of facts, and you're then supposed to provide legal advice. Assuming you were a solicitor, you provide legal advice to a fictitious client. So that's what the legal memorandum is going to be all about. All the facts are interconnected. All the problem questions are also interconnected. But all the topics that you will need to have been familiar with all pertain to the weeks prior to the deadline for that midterm assessment. There are 10 marks, 1 for each engagement in online tutorial, or if you can do that, that's right, yes. So you won't, so because there are certain, thank you for raising that, Rice. It's important that we clarify this point. So we have certain weeks where you might have 4 or 5 discussion questions. You can only get a maximum of 1 mark for each week. Okay, so as I said earlier, you're only expected to answer 1 question for each week. You can answer more, but you will only get a maximum of 1 mark for each week. Now, what this also means is that if you answer a discussion question, let's say in week 1, and then also join a tutorial session, you're still only going to get 1%, because you're only allocated 1 mark for each week. So that should be clear. So the mere fact that you're joining an online tutorial as well as answering a discussion question will not mean that you get double marks. There will only be 1 mark for each week. Now, I would...
May I ask a question, please?
Go ahead. Yes, Sarah.
Just with regards to the tutorial questions, would you prefer that we each post our own individual response, or more of an interactive type, if somebody else has posted something that we have a comment on, an interactive conversation about their question?
You can do both. You can post your own individual answer, but it would also be very helpful if you actually provide a comment to the answer of your peers. That will also be considered as part of the online group participation mark.
Thank you.
Okay. You have the right. Okay. From Amelia, so assuming that you end up with an answer to a discussion question and your answer is actually off target or it's wrong, will it mean that you don't get the mark? You will still get the mark. So for as long as it is a legitimate attempt to come up with a plausible answer, you will get the mark. So it's not about, you know, whether you had the correct answer or not. The important thing is you've actually participated in trying to answer a question. So don't worry about the fact that your answer might be incorrect. The important thing is just a legitimate answer and you come up with a plausible answer, that's fine. That's fine. So that's the online group participation is worth 10%. Then we have the legal memorandum, which comprises 40%. The final written assessment, hold on. There's a question here from Melissa. Okay, yep, I'm probably gonna have to correct that. What's that, Sarah? Feeling a bit dumb. Whose esteemed company is that? Is that for somebody else? You're speaking to Melissa, I imagine.
My apologies, I'm sorry.
Okay. Melissa, I'll probably need to correct that because in the word count, the footnotes and bibliography will not be counted. So you're correct. The footnotes will be excluded as well as the bibliography. But so I'll make that clarification in one of the postings in Moodle. So there's the legal memorandum, and then the final written assessment. Yeah, it all depends because you know, we can always make it more difficult or easy depending on how the class goes. So I guess, I think the reason why the final written assessment that I gave the last time was a bit difficult was because we had problems with the marking in the sense that I didn't really mark the midterm assessment, the legal memorandum for last term, and most of the grades that were given were actually, most of the marks were quite high. And so I had to balance that by coming up with a more difficult final written assessment, and there were quite a number who actually failed. But assuming that, you know, most students do well in the legal memorandum, the final written assessment take-home paper is likely to be reasonable in terms of the kind of questions that will be asked. Easier to answer, I guess. Yeah. So we could make it easier because yeah, students struggled with the last written assessment. They didn't really know what to do. Yeah. Okay. So what else do you think, Jesse? Did you want to say something? I think Jesse raised his or her hand. Sorry, I couldn't see the face.
Is that better?
Yes, Jesse, I see you.
Yep. With the memorandum, is there somewhere that we can obtain sort of a format on how to actually sort of draft that piece of work?
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you. I will post some exemplars of legal memorandum so you can have a look. It's the structure itself, the format itself is really not that important. So there could be many ways of you structuring a legal memorandum that won't be very cute son. Yeah, Jesse, very cute. How old is he? Is he 7?
7, yeah.
Figure that out. Okay, yeah. So there are many ways of coming up with a format for the legal memorandum. For as long as you structure it as a legal memorandum, you'll be fine. Now, I will then post some exemplars of exceptional legal memoranda, and they are exceptional in the way that they've presented answers to the case problems. So both when you examine the substantive aspect, the correctness and comprehensiveness of the answers, as well as the way that the answers were presented, the formal part of it, the way they were written, the way that the arguments were made, you will see that they are really exemplars. So I'm going to post them before the end of the week, so you can have a look. Now, the legal memorandum really is preparing the legal memorandum is an important skill, because when you become a lawyer, you will be preparing a lot of legal memoranda, because that's when you provide legal advice. So if you provide legal advice, chances are you'll be asked to put it in writing, and that will be in the form of a legal memorandum. So it could be like, one of the partners will say, we have this legal question that's being asked. Can you prepare a legal memorandum about this? How do you answer this? So it would be helpful to have had the opportunity to actually write a legal memorandum. Then you won't have to be surprised later on when you practice law, because you've had the chance to do it, in our course. And the other thing is, the one thing that you need to avoid, and it might be irrelevant to a lot of you, but I've come across cases where some of the students came up with answers in bullet points. If you're going to be a lawyer, what's that? I was just looking at the statement of Sarah here. Sorry, got distracted. If you're going to be lawyers, you really need to get used to the idea that you'll be doing a lot of writing. Okay, and if you're going to be doing a lot of writing, you need to be able to express yourselves in complete sentences or complete paragraphs. So bullet points can be helpful in doing a presentation, but if you're going to be preparing a pleading or making an application, it's crucial that you write proper sentences instead of just bullet points, which are ways of telegraphing short ideas and so on. Okay. Anything else that you wish to discuss? Anything else you wish to clarify? There's really so much to learn in administrative law, and I can tell you it's a very helpful course, especially when you then begin to deal with QCAT because you have a license and they're not going to give it to you. It might be because there are certain government benefits that you want to access and the government is unwilling to give it to you. It could be because somebody's job in the public sector was threatened and they plan to dismiss that person because that person may have violated certain rules concerning ethics and they didn't have a hearing. What do we do about that? So administrative law, as like most subjects of law or fields of law, can have significance to our daily lives, because really when you look at administrative law, it's all about the decisions made by the executive. So whether the executive, the prime minister and his cabinet, or at the level of the states, let's say the Queensland Premier or the Prime Minister rather, the Queensland Premier and her cabinet, they do make decisions every day that affect us as a people. And that's what administrative law is all about. How to respond to decisions made by the executive when we feel that certain of our rights or interests or legitimate expectations may have been infringed upon. And so we therefore know what the remedies are. So whether we should be going to the courts because we feel that it involves a question of law, or whether the better way of doing it will be to go to the administrative tribunals. Now there's a question here. Is there a video presentation? No, it's just simply going to be a written presentation based on a written legal memorandum. There won't be any video presentation at all. Okay. Anything else? Questions? I'm hoping that the students here, well, a lot of the HA students, if you want to step up to the plate and encourage the other students to get to know you better and come to you. Yeah, Melissa, we can do that. Yes, we can hold a special session where we could discuss the legal memorandum. We will do that probably a week before. Yeah, we can do that. Anything else that you may wish to discuss? So we're good? Okay, it's just the first day, so we don't have to, use up all the time. So thanks for joining tonight's session. I look forward to seeing you again, and see you soon. Feel free to send me an email if you have any questions. Okay, bye everyone.
Thanks.